Celtic Badass of the Week showcases a different badass person of Celtic heritage each week. Those who exemplify the give no shit attitude and come out on top. They may come from our past or our present, but rest assured they come from all walks of life and legend. They are men, women, even old ladies and pirate queens. You don't have to be a muscled-up Celt in a fur kilt swinging a mighty sword. You can just be a 4'11" Welsh woman and suffragette who knows jujitsu. Most of these badasses are all too real. While some may be only legend, badass legends though. The only prerequisite for this title is Celtic blood and badassedness. Captain James Macrae. Now, few things made 18th century sailors blast a load of grapeshot into their trousers with greater ferocity than the sight of a giant ominous black flag fluttering in the breeze from the mast of a badass warship teeming with unshaven, hook-handed, face-slashing, ball-stomping pirate-ass destroyers. So you can probably imagine what was going through the mind of James Macrae, captain of the East India Company's ship Cassandra, when he saw not one but two Jolly Rogers pulling into the port on Johanna Island and floating towards him on a warm afternoon in August 1720. Macrae and his crew had pulled into port on Tiny Island off the coast of Madagascar, looking to replenish their stores of food, casks of water, and kegs of top-shelf Bacardi. But now all of a sudden they found themselves neck-high in crap without their inflatable water wings. Now Macrae, he hailed another East India ship that was in port, and the Cassandra's sister ship, Greenwich. But the coward asshole captain of the Greenwich was like, "So long, I'm out of here, see you in hell." Macrae screamed untold obscenities at the Greenwich, even going as far as firing a volley at her while she ran for her life like a little bitch. But she evaporated in a cloud of smoke like something out of a Scooby-Doo rerun. The Cassandra now found herself boxed in by two golden age of piracy's most successful cutthroats. Fancy, commanded by Edward England, and Victory under Captain John Taylor. Now Macrae and his crewmen weren't exactly hardcore SAS paratroopers, but they weren't the kind of chumps that were going to sit back and let a group of scurvy pirate assholes eviscerate them with cutlasses either. Macrae unflinchingly ordered his men to load their cannons, and as soon as the Victory was within range, Cassandra turned and blasted her with a devastating broadside. The initial impact of being pounded by dozens of giant balls sent the Victory reeling, and a local pride parade envious. The second cannonade from Cassandra blew off part of her mainsail. The pirates dropped 20 sets of oars into the water in an attempt to row their damaged ship close enough to board Macrae's vessel. But luckily, a third volley of lead death blew those oars into splinters. Even this didn't deter the pirates from their mission to slit the throats of every sailor aboard Cassandra, and the now crippled Victory continued to limp towards them like a shambling undead zombie. Around this time, Fancy pulled into range and released a volley of her own at Cassandra. Fragments of the deck hurtled through the ship with deadly ferocity, killing several of Macrae's men as they furiously attempted to reload their weapons. Before Cassandra could even wheel about for a broadside on this new opponent, Victory had pulled in close enough to unleash a bombardment of her own. Cassandra was getting smacked with more balls than a passed-out sorority girl. Now, for over 2 hours, Macrae traded fire with Fancy and Victory as these mighty sailing ships pummeled the crap out of each other relentlessly. But the situation aboard Cassandra was becoming increasingly desperate. Her surviving crewmen were now pouring musket as well as cannon fire into rapidly closing pirate ships. But casualties were quickly mounting, and Captain Macrae knew that his men wouldn't stand a chance in close-quarters combat with those bloodthirsty, heavily armed, battle-hardened pirates. He ordered his ship to set sail, full speed towards the shore, where his men would hopefully escape into the dense jungles on the island's interior. But Captain England of the Fancy was quick to realize what Macrae was up to. Fancy moved to take the angle out and cut Cassandra off. She struck a shoal and became lodged in the sand. Cassandra attempted to go around Fancy, but she too became grounded on a sandbar. Wedged into the surf, where mere feet from a pirate vessel, from point-blank range, the two vessels exchanged several brutal broadsides, causing even more structural damage. Ammunition was running low on board Cassandra, and even though they had taken a musket ball off the skull and was bleeding profusely from a massive head wound, Macrae still had his men loading the cannons with chains, nails, broken beer bottles, handfuls of rifle bullets, and anything else they could find to shoot at fancy. Now, both ships were almost completely destroyed at this point, and now victory was limping towards the immobilized Cassandra, unleashing volleys of musket fire and shouting intimidating insults about the crew's collective mothers. When the pirates on board Victory threw their hooks over the side of Cassandra and prepared to haul themselves on board, Macrae knew that the battle was lost. He was completely outnumbered by bloodthirsty pirates, and his surviving crewmen weren't exactly fresh and ready to go. He ordered the men to throw a double load of powder into the cannons, and when they fired their final volley, he used the smokescreen to cover his crew's escape. The men scrambled to their ships or swam to shore, where they were able to run deep into the tropical jungle of Johanna Island. Jackass pirates swarmed over the decks of Cassandra, slashing the throats of any wounded or dying men that he came across, and plundering the cargo hold of precious goods from India and China. Unfortunately for our hero, pirates don't give up that easily, especially after taking a beating like the one Captain Macrae had ever so righteously laid upon them. Squads of pirates combed the jungles of the island searching for the captain and his men, intent on avenging their fallen brethren. Macrae and his starving, war-weary, wounded crew evaded these patrols, living off the land deep in inhospitable jungle for 10 days before Macrae finally decided to say, "I've had enough of this BS." Then, in one of the most brazen displays of brass balls ever recorded, Captain Macrae put on his full-dress uniform and strode towards the coast. A large group of pirates were standing on the docks, completely astonished that the man that they had been searching for so intently was now walking right up to him. The captain confidently marched right up to the pirate commanders, stated his name and rank, unflinchingly demanded the return of his ship and cargo, and requested safe passage for him and his crew. Now, obviously, the pirate captains didn't know what to make of this shit, so on one hand, the man standing before them was personally responsible for the deaths of over 100 pirates while suffering only 37 casualties of his own. Many believed he deserved to be tied to the mast and beaten to death with herrings. However, everyone also had to respect the enormous balls of full badassitude that Macrae evidently possessed. Luckily, as it turned out, quite a few of the pirates aboard Fancy and Victory had actually served under Captain Macrae, and they all remembered him as being fair and just leader, who commanded the respect of his men. Eventually, the pirates decided that they couldn't possibly commit the cold-blooded murder of man with as much badassitude as Captain James Macrae. So, they kept his ship, but allowed safe passage for his men, returned one half of his supplies aboard Cassandra, and sailed off, leaving him with the half-destroyed Fancy. Macrae and his men performed some emergency repairs and then set off with little more than a skeleton crew to operate the ship. For 48 days, the starving, dehydrated, half-dead men sailed on barely seaworthy vessel, finally reaching Bombay in October 1720, where they were greeted as heroes by the local British administration. For his amazing courage, Captain Macrae was promoted by the East India Company and eventually became the governor of Madras, an extremely prestigious post within the British Empire. While in office, he fought corruption and eventually retired to his home in Scotland, an incredibly wealthy man. Captain James Macrae wasn't a hardcore cutthroat pirate sailing the seas, plundering enemy ships and slashing Spanish soldiers' guts out with a fishing gaff made out of gold doubloons. He was a regular man who found unbelievable fortitude at a time when most men would have just urinated themselves. He whipped his group of civilian soldiers into a force that inflicted 3 times the number of casualties they received. And he put forth an amazing display of bravery, so brave that it bordered on foolhardiness. Definitely a total badass.